Guys, welcome back. My name is Danielle and this is Daniela Diaries. Today we have a new series in our Chicago true crime episode. So if you guys are a true crime junkie like myself and you are here for a murder mystery, please stay tuned. Hey friends, welcome back. I hope you are doing well. Back by popular demand is another episode of our Chicago True Crime series. If you guys are new here, I try to do monthly installments on different episodes or different stories of true crime that is kind of happening within the Chicagoland area. Some stories are outside of Chicago, just mainly in the state of Illinois, or some just happen right in the middle of it, like the one we're going to cover today. So if you guys are true crime junkies like myself, and maybe you've been to Chicago, or you are from Chicago, or maybe you just like, the stories in general, I would hope you would stay tuned. Please subscribe, share the stories, share the series, and we will jump into it. The case we are going to talk about today was actually requested by quite a number of you, and I recently put up a poll and I gave 3 different options and you guys voted on the Grimes sisters. The Grimes sisters is actually the longest open case in the Cook County history. A lot of people think it's Chicago, but Cook County is just the county within Chicago. So it is the longest running unsolved murder case. And it's still, believe it or not, it is still making news. Recently, I believe it was in 2019, they even had a segment here on a local news station like CBS 2, and a lot of the family members from the Grimes family were requesting for the case to keep being investigated. Trigger warning to some of you, if you guys are not here for true crime, I understand that, but this is going to talk about the murder of 2 underage girls, possible sexual assault on 2 underage girls, and it's just honestly a really sad story, and this might be a trigger for some people, so definitely viewer discretion is advised. So without further ado, let us talk about the Grimes sisters. December 28, 1956, 15-year-old Barbara and 12-year-old Patricia Grimes were 2 sisters, and they decided to head on over to the theater. The sisters are from the McKinley Park area, which I am very familiar with. It is a South Side area, mostly just, blue-collar workers, and it's just one of those like neighborhoods, a South Side neighborhood. Everybody knew everyone. The Grimes kids, there was quite a few of them. I believe there were 6 of them. And back in the day, especially on the South Side, it was those families, and everybody had large families back then, and the kids all knew each other, and it was just the way it was. My mom was one of 8. It was big families, small homes, and everybody knew everybody, especially in the South areas, the South Side areas. And McKinley Park was a very blue collar neighborhood. Patty and Barbara decided that this day that they were going to see the man, Elvis Presley. He had just released his movie Love Me Tender, and they were huge Presley fans, much like pretty much every girl that age or in that time. My daughters still to this day love Elvis. I love Elvis. He's just timeless. And they were even members of his fan club. They were truly obsessed. So they wanted to go see the Love Me Tender at the Brighton Park Theater. Brighton Park and McKinley Park sometimes are related as the same area because they are literally right next to each other. I guess if you're from McKinley, if you're from the city, you're from parks, or there's you're divided by the parks you live by or the church pastures that you're in. So they were very close. So the girls were gonna they didn't know if they were going to take the bus or if they were going to go walking, but they wanted to go ahead and watch Love Me Tender at the Brighton Park Theater. It was about a mile away from their home, so they could have either walked or took the bus. I'm assuming they probably took the bus because it's December 28th and it's winter here in Chicago. It's frigid. It is very, very cold, and it's usually a lot of snow on the ground. So the girls went ahead and they had $2.50 in their pocket, and the mom said, okay, if you're gonna go, make sure you keep an extra 50 cents in your wallet just in case you wanted to stay for the double feature. The girls had already seen this movie 11 times. Huge Presley fans. And what's crazy is that 50 cents for a movie ticket. Could you imagine? I think it's like $10, $12 to get into a movie now. And so they were going to go ahead, they're going to go see Elvis, they're going to go watch Love Me Tender. The movie was supposed to start at 7 o'clock, and their mother expected them home by midnight. Remind you, these girls were 15 and 12 years old, okay? 2 girls. It's dark out already. It's already daylight savings time, so usually around that time here, you know, by 4 o'clock it's dark out. And I couldn't imagine sending my daughters out walking to anywhere. So it's crazy. And to remember, this is also the 1950s. Life is different. People are naive. And people might say that the world was ruined by technology. Some cases, yes, but also I think that technology made stranger danger have a face. You know, everybody knew about the stranger danger, but nobody's seen a face to it until you've seen all these things popping up on Facebook or on Instagram, or, you know what I mean? There was always Amber Alerts, you know, so was there some drawbacks? Yes, but technology, I think, really has helped save a lot of kids. So the girls were at the movies, they were watching Love Me Tender, they were just having a blast. One of their schoolmates, her name was Dorothy Weinert, she actually sat behind the sisters. She was actually seeing the movie with hers, I think it was her sister as well, and she sat right behind the girls, and you know, she said everything was fine. There was nobody there like talking to them, they didn't get any weird attention, there was nobody there that kind of gave them the creeps. Everything was just normal. And after the first, I guess, airing of Love Me Tender finished, Dorothy and her sibling went ahead and went home. She said that she did notice that the Grimes sisters were going ahead and they were going to go buy some popcorn and they were going to stay for the second feature. And that was the last time anybody had seen the Grime girls. Since they went ahead and stayed for that second feature, they were anticipated to be home about like 11:45, midnight. They were going to, you know, pretty much assuming arrive on the bus. And by the time midnight rolled around and their mom, Loretta Grimes, noticed that the girls weren't home, she started to get worried. So she went ahead and sent out her 2 other children. It was 17-year-old Teresa and 14-year-old Joseph, and said, hey, you know what? Your sister should have been home a little while ago. Go walk to the bus and the bus stop and wait for them to come. Because, you know, I don't want them walking back to sleep by themselves. And while you're gone, I'm going to call a few of their friends to see if maybe they stopped at one of their friends' house. So the siblings went to go walk to the bus stop, and 3 or 4 buses had passed. They were out there for quite some time, and after every bus came and dropped off people and their sisters weren't on there, they started to get worried. So they went home and they told their mom, like, they're not on this bus, on any of these buses. I don't know where they're at. The mom called around to the girls in the neighborhood. Again, a different time. If you're my age, you probably remember when your mom had to have the number of your friends, so if they ever had to find you, someone always could get in contact with somebody. And none of her friends had seen the girls either. So they knew that something was wrong. This was unlike the girls. The girls were really responsible. They were good kids. And the mom was like, you know what? We need to call the police. So at 2:15 on December 29th, the girls were officially marked as missing. The disappearance of the Grimes sisters really marked something historical in the Cook County area. This is the biggest missing persons case ever in Cook County. As far as manhunt hours and time that police put in, it wasn't only Chicago police. Surrounding suburbs were coming in to help look for these girls. Cook County sheriffs were coming in to help look for these girls. You know, I know a lot of different areas you guys live in. You may have, you know, sheriffs that patrol, or county people that patrol your area. In Chicago, we have Chicago police, and we also have Cook County sheriffs, and then the surrounding municipalities have their own police. So everybody was coming in. This was really an all hands on deck. 2 young girls missing in the dead of winter. People were worried, and people were coming in to help. So a citywide search had taken place. Hundreds of police were actually assigned to find these girls as their full-time position. This wasn't something that was getting swept underneath the rug, and people wanted these girls found. It was scary, and they needed to know what was going on. On December 29th, search teams started to look for the girls. Hundreds of volunteers came from the neighborhood. Again, remember, these are close-knit neighborhoods, lots of kids, and people, it was a village back then. A village took to raise the kids. So this hit home to everyone, and everybody wanted these girls found. Everybody's seeing their own kids in these young girls. So this was not something that was going to be taken lightly. They were on a mission to find these kids. You know, there was door-to-door canvassing. They were passing out flyers. They were there was canals and little rivers. There's like a little park, and there's a little river behind there. The Chicago River is not too far. So, you know, they were really searching. They were on their P's and Q's, you know, for the search of these girls. They had questioned over 300,000 people and had 2,000 serious people questioned as people of interest. But there was no evidence. These girls just vanished. As more publicity came and more media attention came, these girls by December 30th were on the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times. It was a big media frenzy for to find these kids. So once the media started to really share these stories, again, the girls were on the front page of the paper, all these sightings started coming in. People were saying that they seen the girls walking around the neighborhood. Some people said that they seen the girls at the bus station, that they were jumping on a bus to go to Nashville to see Elvis because they were going to take off and run away from home like Elvis did and, you know, start this big career. Some people said that they had seen them walking down the streets and that they seen her get into a car with a guy who looked like Elvis, seen the sisters get into a car with a man who looked like Elvis. So with all this and just the disappearance and the girls, basically no one ever seen them, they just vanished, like they didn't want to be found. The police put it as the girls ran away. They assumed that these girls ran away and that was it. Nobody took them. They just took them as a runaway. They're at that age. They probably ran away. They probably have a boyfriend. You know, that's what they're doing. Oh, we shouldn't search so much anymore. They'll show up. You know, kids will be kids type thing. And the mom was like, no way. My daughters are not like this. They would not run away. They don't have boyfriends. They are gone. Somebody took them. And that, even to this day, even to all these true crime cases, when somebody says, oh, I think they ran away, leave them be, don't do that. Don't do that because you don't know. And when you say leave them be and that traction dies and that attention dies on them, most of the time so do they, because no one's hiding them. You know, you need that heat. You need that pressure. Just don't assume people run away is all I'm saying. So when the girls hit that newspaper, they were assumed as a missing persons case. Not the fact that they had already been gone for, you know, over 72 hours. It wasn't a missing, possibly dead. It was just a missing persons case. So throughout all this time from, you know, from December 29th on all the way up until about January 7th, the cops kept receiving calls of possible sightings. People were saying that they seen them in Nashville. People said that they seen them walking downtown. People said they seen them walking the neighborhood. I mean, the craziest places. People were calling and saying they seen them at this, like the stories were like budding up. One person said, I just seen them on Tuesday at 5 p.m. and they were on Wabash in the heart of downtown. And then someone was like, oh my God, that same time I seen them too, but they were in the Cicero town. Like they were on complete opposite ends of the city. And I mean, it was just a media frenzy at this point. And it was a lot of false sightings, but the police were trying to follow up with these leads, but they had known that like there's no way that these people could be seeing these girls all at the same time. Loretta Grimes even went on to media and pleaded. She went on with the newspaper, she got on a radio show, and she was like, hey, anybody, if you have my kids, please bring them back. Let me have them. I will forgive you from the bottom of my heart. Please, please give me my children back. She knew somebody had her girls. She knew that those girls didn't run away. She knew somebody took them. And I swear to you, a mother's intuition is always right. Always. The news of this case was so public and had such high media coverage, it even reached down to Elvis Presley himself. And Elvis Presley, through his people over at Graceland, even made a public statement to the media and said, I'm going to quote this now, if you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries. Some people had reported that Elvis Presley even made a radio spoke on the radio, but then it turned out to be false. But there was a release from Graceland, from like his management team, pleading if the girls were in Nashville or were trying to find him, hey, go home. January 22nd, 1957, so it's already been almost a whole month since these girls have been seen. The last sighting that they had received from, you know, people was on January 7th, and after that it's been quiet. So like I said, in December, winters in Chicago are pretty brutal. We get very cold and very snowy very quick here. And it was just like that. It was really cold. They had a really nasty cold snap that was happening at the end of December throughout January, and it started to warm up. Sometimes we get a little break, and at the end of January, it started to warm up a little bit, and some of the snow started to defrost. I'm sure you guys can see where I'm going with this. So a construction worker named Leonard Prescott was driving down the road, and it was at this time it was called Unincorporated Lyons. If you guys are from the area, it's basically Burr Ridge. We're going to talk about this street that the girls were found on. Pause. And he was driving down the street, and he had noticed over it was kind of like a country road, and they at the time, it's still pretty country because I actually know where this is at, and it's like forest preserve-y. So he was driving down the road, and he had noticed over like the guard railings that it looked like mannequins or something like that, like we're on the side of the road, and he kind of seen it, and he was like, oh, that's weird. And he just like, I guess he went home, and then later on he had picked up his wife, and he's like, you know what, I've seen these mannequins on the side of the street. You want to go look at them and see what they are? Maybe they were going out. I don't know. I just kind of made up that conversation. So anyways, him and his wife were driving down the road, and they jump out, and the wife actually walks over to the mannequins, and as she approaches, she sees what is there, and she actually faints. Leonard runs over to attend to his wife, and there they found the bodies of Barbara and Patricia. They were basically looking like they were just tossed on the side of the road. The girls had no clothes on. Right away, the Prescott family calls, 911, calls the police, and the police come out there, and it is crazy. I'm going to insert as many pictures so you guys can see, and it was, it was crazy. So this is the thing where I want to tell you. The girls live McKinley Park area. McKinley Park roughly is about Archer and Western, okay? That's what we're going to give it as. Where these girls' bodies were found was in Burr Ridge, okay? So Burr Ridge, Willow Springs, this is basically on the complete other side of Archer. All right, so it's a good, I would say a 35 minute ride, but they are very close to the expressway where they are at McKinley Park and where this location is where the girls' bodies were found. I think that's what happened. I think they picked the girls up in McKinley, they got on the expressway, and that's where they left them on. That's just my opinion though, but whatever. What do I know? So it is believed that the girls were driven there, and then their bodies were either dragged and placed there or just tossed. By the way it looked like they were just tossed because their legs were kind of bent weird. It's really wild. If you go on Google, you could actually see where the news reporters were actually taking pictures of these girls' bodies. So you could actually see it, like where they're still in the grass. It's crazy. So 3 wounds resembling ice pick marks were found in the center of Barbara's chest. And then injuries resembling like blunt force trauma were found all over their head, their face, on both of the girls. Again, both girls were found to have no clothes on as well. The girl's father, Joseph Grimes, was driven to the location and was asked to identify the girls' bodies on the side of the road. That, when I read that, I was like, why didn't they take them to like the coroner? Like, why bring them to the location? I couldn't imagine being that dad and having to see that. After the positive ID, police and volunteers searched the entire area. They scoured through all the forest preserves. I mean, it is really just like outdoorsy over there. It's just woods, debris, snow. It's just, it's a really not a good area to try to search for anything at. And it's a really big area too. But there was hundreds of people out there from, again, different counties, different suburbs. Everybody was coming around trying to find any clues to help identify who the possible murderer could be of these girls. Remember what I said, there was volunteers looking and searching for evidence. Volunteers, not trained police officials, volunteers. So the girls did have an autopsy done by 3 different forensic specialists. And the thing is, with all 3 of them, nobody could actually agree on anything. You have to remember the girls were found in the dead of winter, and they were found on a snowbank. So the ice pretty much preserved their body. If you keep a body on ice, it's going to preserve. So that was one thing, and it was really cold, so their body didn't really decay. So I feel like that could have helped them, and it could have not helped them. You know what I mean? I'm not a forensic specialist, but you know, that's all I think. But the findings on the autopsies were weird because they didn't label the girl's cause of death as murder. It's not labeled. If you look at it right now, it's what is technically labeled at now is murder secondary to shock. Their first reason of death or cause of death was shock, that the girls actually froze to death and went into shock because of the extreme temperature, and that's how they died. The ice picks and everything else were second to it. They also said that all the bruises and markings on their bodies was from rodents, not from anybody beating them. They did find evidence of, yeah, they found proof of like that there was some kind of sexual relations happening with Barbara, but not on Patricia. There was no proof of molestation. Their toxicology report came out clean, so there was no liquor, no alcohol, no drugs, nothing in their system. And by looking at their stomach contents, so they assumed that they had to die within 5 hours of actually leaving the movie theater. And that the ice pick marks that they had seen on Barbara's chest were inflicted after death. So that wasn't what killed her. So, which makes no sense. So they're saying that the girls died from shock and from, you know, basically frozen to death. Like, let's be real. And that the person came back, because it takes a while for that to happen. Like, you got to be out there for a little bit. It's not like a quick thing, you know. It's actually very long and brutal. So they left him out there and then came back and put the ice pick in her chest. Like, that, none of that makes sense. Like, this whole thing, and this is 3 different experts, and it's like, where did all 3 of you go to school? Because this makes no sense. You see what I'm saying? Like, their cause of death was shock due to the weather, and then all the bruises and the stuff on their face and their head, that was caused by rodents. Like, rodents are bashing their head in. Like, I don't understand where any of these things made any sense. It was awful. But this is what happens. And this is how I appreciate the advancement of medicine and, you know, law and all these things, okay? So there was a chief Cook County medical examiner, okay? The chief of all of them. And remind you, the autopsies were not performed by the people in Cook County. They brought in 3 specialists from outside of the Cook County coroner's office. But the chief Cook County coroner disagreed completely with all 3 of them. And I'm going to read you exactly what he says, and I actually really agree with his statements. So he said that he disagreed with the time of death on the girls, which I do as well. He said the girls were beaten, and that was not by any rodents that made those, and I agree with that as well. There's, you know, if you've never seen anybody who has been chewed up by, like, rodents, it's little nibble marks. They don't do any, anyways, it's sorry to be graphic, but it is different. The girls were alive up until January 7th. Remember, the last sighting of the girls came in on January 7th. Okay, so it's correlating. There's a correlation here. And the reason why he determined that their last day of living was January 7th was because of the ice and stuff on their body. And with science, they're able to tell the degree of how much ice you should have if you're out in the weather and stuff like that. I don't know the science behind that, but obviously they do, and that's what they went to school for, right? He believes that the girls were sexually assaulted, which I agree. Also, I agree that the ice pick to the chest, 3 of them, I believe, and it was Barbara who also had the evidence of having some kind of sexual encounter. I believe it was a crime of passion. I believe it was somebody they knew. I think so. And the thing is they ended up finding curdled milk, and the girls would not drink milk at the movie theater. So they had to have that later, after, like, time after that. The chief believed that the case was covered up to protect the mother's feelings. And I'm gonna tell you, this went from these poor girls to victim blaming really quick in the media. And when I tell you the things they said, you're going to be absolutely disgusted. And when the chief Cook County coroner said all these things, he was fired. He was fired because the higher ups did not like the fact that he publicly spoke out against what the 3 other people found, and, you know, that he was kind of, you know, poking the bear, and they kind of wanted this case to go away, so he was fired. He was later rehired by Sheriff Joseph, what's his name, Joseph Lohman, because he agreed with him, but this will be years later after he was rehired. So remember when I said there was a lot of victim shaming and victim blaming? So much. They had started this thing where they said that the girls were very promiscuous, that the sisters would stand outside these bars outside of 38th Street, which is where that McKinley Park is not too far from like back of the yards, and at this time the meatpacking district was huge, so there was a lot of bars around there for people to come to after work, and that the girls would sit outside the bars, that they would flirt with all the older men to get them to buy them beer and to get them drunk. The girls were promiscuous, like kind of seeing like, well, this is what happens. They probably got into a car and got with somebody, you know, like blaming them for what happened. Absolutely disgusting. And the mother caught wind of this, and the mother was pissed. She's like, no, my daughters would not do that. My daughters are not at the bar. This is not their fault. This, you know, like she stood up for her kids, and she was not taking this sitting down. She said that these girls were murdered by somebody they knew. And she stood by this, and she stood by this for the rest of her life, that these girls were probably got into a car with somebody they knew when they were walking home, and that's what happened. These girls didn't just jump in with a stranger. These girls didn't run away. She was like, look, you've been wrong. First you said they ran away. You said they were in Nashville. Now you're saying that these girls are all sleeping around. Like, no, this is not it. There's a murderer out there, and you guys need to find them. So here we go. There are 3 main suspects, and I have an idea on who it is, but we'll get into that. The first suspect, this guy's a goofy, okay? He's real goofy. Edward Lee Benny Bedwell. He was the very first key suspect. 21-year-old guy. He was like semi-illiterate. He was a drifter from Nashville, and he kind of just, he was a good-looking kid. He resembled Elvis, but my grandpa Hank resembled Elvis. They all did this Elvis here. It was like what the girls liked, you know, that supposedly he resembled Elvis, and so that was it. Somebody said they had seen him, that they seen the girls get into a car with somebody look like Elvis, so like, this is him. So remember, semi-illiterate, he was working at these bars, they call it Skid Row on Madison Street. I never heard it called Skid Row, like I had to like Google it and like talk to my dad about it. It's still, the Skid Row is still very much alive on the west side of Chicago, but it's usually, you know, where the girls have night work, you know? And so there's a lot of like kind of sketchy bars, hotels, and stuff like that. It's kind of a pretty bad neighborhood, I'm not gonna lie. But he worked, he washed dishes there. He was like a busboy at one of the restaurants. He worked a lot of random jobs, okay? He was, like I said, he was a drifter just trying to get by. Well, what the restaurant he worked on Madison Street, the owners said that they seen him come in with the 2 girls on December 30th, him and his friend, and they were with these girls, and they called the police and like, yeah, we seen him with him. And like one of the other customers there were like, yeah, totally, he was with those 2 girls, and him and his friend, and that was it. So the police hear this, are like, all right, cool, this guy, you know, that's it. They said they seen him. So the police arrest Bedwell, and they interrogate him for 3 days. If you guys are new here, the interrogations and the corrupting and the brutality during these times were very harsh, okay? And there's been many cases where false confessions have been retrieved by people, especially for somebody like Bedwell, who was semi-illiterate, you know, just saying, okay? So initially when Bedwell was interrogated, he denied even being with the girls. Then on January 27th, 1957, Bedwell went ahead and signed a 14-page confession. How was he going to write 14 pages of a confession when he's basically illiterate, okay? But that's another story for another day. So basically, just to kind of give it a breakdown, he said that basically him and his friend William Willingham had been with the sisters on December 30th through January 7th, okay? Saying they fed the girls hot dogs and booze, and then they beat the girls and tossed their nude bodies on the side of the road after they denied sexual advances, okay? Even the mother, Loretta Grimes, completely denied his confession. She said, there's no way that my kids would have been on Madison Street. They didn't even know where that was, and they would not have gotten in the car with him. Okay? A mother knows her kids. I know sometimes a mother can be a little delusional about what their children do, but for the most part, I'm sure she knows what her kids would be up to, okay? Here's the thing though. Their confession is completely wrong. This confession was completely false. Remember, when the autopsy was performed, there was no hot dogs found in the girl's stomach, and they did the toxicology report on the girls, and there was no liquor or drugs found in the girl's system. So due to this, and then he later admitted that he was forced into admitting this confession because the police said after 4 days of being in custody, the police said, if you go ahead and admit to it, we'll let you go home. So we did it, and then, you know, he was acquitted because obviously it was a false story. They did find his friend, that William, what's his name? William Willingham. What a name. They did go ahead and contact his friend, and his friend was like, no way, we were not with those girls. Yes, we were with some girls, but it wasn't those girls. I had no part of those girls, like nothing. And to just kind of clean up his alibi, Edward was at work. He was working in the town of Cicero, which is a good 40 minutes away from the location where these girls were at, and he was working at an Ajax factory. He clocked in at 4:15 and he clocked out at 12:30 in the morning. So he couldn't have made it all the way back in time to see these girls walking. So there was no way he could have done it. It was just completely not possible. So he was later released. But don't think that he was an innocent angel face. Oh, no, no, no. He was also tried and later acquitted on a rape of another 15-year-old. She 15? No, I'm sorry, a 13-year-old girl in Florida. He ended up getting acquitted of it, but he ended up dying in 1972. So we can never follow up with him anyways. Now, suspect number dos. All right, this is a young 17-year-old boy, Max Flegg. Max Flegg was 17 years old, and he was considered to be a prime subject. Max was from the neighborhood. He knew the girls. And here's the thing though, Max at this time was 17 years old. He was considered a minor. So when it came to interrogating them, they really couldn't, right? It was different. There was no like being charged as an adult in these times. It was still 18, under 18, you were a minor. So also during these times, they really held polygraphs to a really high standard. And they could not make him take a polygraph, but I think it was the sergeant, oh no, the police captain kind of convinced him into taking an unofficial polygraph. While taking this polygraph test, he admitted to the murder of these girls. And they couldn't do anything with it because it was an unofficial polygraph, because they weren't supposed to do it in the first place. They had no proof to tie this guy to the case. They're saying that there was a lot of little details that he knew that people shouldn't know. They never released what details he knew though, so who do you believe? But they're saying yes, he confessed. But since there was no evidence and they could not use that polygraph, they had to let him go. Flegg was also arrested on an unrelated murder of another young woman a few years later. And then here's the third suspect. His name is Walter Krantz. Walter Krantz was like 52 years old. He was a self-proclaimed psychic. So what happened with Walter Krantz is a few days before the girls' bodies were actually found, he called 911 and said that he had a dream and he knows where the girls' bodies are located, and he gave them the location of where the bodies would be. And when the operator said, "Could I ask for your name?" he said no and hung up. The operator, thought pretty quick, and she was able to trace the phone call. So when the girls' bodies were found, it was actually within only a mile of where he said it would be. So the police, they found out who he was. They went and they got him. They interrogated him, and basically said that his whole family has a history of being psychics, that it came to him when he was blackout drunk, he got super drunk, and the vision came to him and it freaked him out, so that's why he called 911. There was no evidence or really anything to link him to these girls, so they couldn't make an arrest on him either. And I don't know, I don't think did you ever see that episode of Law and Order where Martin Short plays that psychic but he's really the bad guy? That's what I thought about when I read him. But anyways, I think psychics are real. I totally think that there's people out there who know these things. And I don't know, I don't think they should be labeled as suspect number one. I can see why they want to interrogate him, but I definitely believe that there's people out there who like have that sense. Totally believe it 100%. So after the murder of these girls, the mother, Loretta Grimes, she was devastated. She couldn't work. She didn't leave her house, and she was struggling. She couldn't, it doesn't say if her and the dad were married, like Joseph Grimes were married, but she had, you know, those, I think she had like 6 kids. You know, she was struggling and she couldn't even pay the mortgage on her house. And the neighborhood really came together. The girl, the youngest daughter went to a private like parochial school, so the church had raised money and people in the neighborhood came together and raised money, and they were able to raise enough money so that Loretta Grimes could actually pay off her home and, you know, be mortgage free, which was a great burden lifted off of her. And they were also able to pay for the girls' funerals. I was looking at pictures of the service, and there's little kids praying next to their caskets. Like, it was just really an awful thing to see these young kids. And the girls were buried. So the girls had their mass. I think it was like St. Walter. I don't even think that church is around anymore. But the girls were actually buried at a cemetery called Holy Sepulchre. It's in Alsip, Illinois. And how, like, it gives me goosebumps, but they're buried at the same cemetery that my grandma, my dad's mom, my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, and my dad's brother are all buried at, and they're in the same location. And my dad was like, do you want to go and look? And I was like, no, I don't want to go and look. There's a guy on YouTube, and he looks at the grave sites of, he's here in Chicago too, and he goes to the grave sites of a lot of people. And like, I get real weird about cemeteries and stuff. Which is, it's so close to home to know that, like, they're right there, you know? So the girls were buried together, and the mother just struggled. The mother even wrote a letter to the police detectives and said, please do not stop looking for this murderer. Please do not forget about my kids. And to this day, that letter is still on their desk, still hanging up in their office, and they're still looking for the murderer of the Grimes sisters. And another thing that I had seen too, that I don't know if I mentioned it, but their classmates were pallbearers. And that to me is just so sad, because death is such a permanent thing. And I feel like when you're young, you're so invincible, and that's just something that you shouldn't have to learn about at such a young age. Like, so much innocence was just shattered. And it's just so upsetting to me that this ugliness exists in the world. May 1957, Loretta Grimes received an anonymous phone call. And this is just to say how crappy I think people are. This wasn't the first anonymous phone call that Loretta Grimes had received. It wasn't, you know, people were saying, you know, just horrible things. Some people were being, you know, sweet about it, but most of it was just jerky kids. So in May 1957, Loretta received a phone call. This phone call stayed with her for the rest of her life. The person on the other end told her how he killed and undressed their daughters. He ridiculed the police. He ridiculed Bedwell and said that he can't believe that he actually thought that he was going to be smart enough to take credit for this guy's murders, and just laughed about what he did. And he told her one thing. He said one thing to her that just made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. I'm going to repeat it to you. He says, I know something about your little girl that no one else knows, not even the police. The smallest one's toes were crossed at the end. And it's very true. Patricia was born with a defect where her toes were crossed over. And who would know that unless they seen it? It was never mentioned. I don't even think the police paid attention to it, but that's something that a mother knows. After he told her that, he laughed, and then he hung up. Years later, the mother would still come on. I think it was like the 13 years after their death, the mother made another public statement and said that she believed the girls were murdered by somebody they knew, that the girls would not be reckless and not just jump in the car with a stranger, and that it's somebody they know, and if you know anything, to stand up, to say something, to not let this person get away with it. In 1987, Loretta Grimes did pass away, and she passed away never knowing who was responsible for taking away her 2 kids. And I could never imagine being a mother, having to live with that. But I hope she rests well knowing that this case did not go cold. In 2013, a retired Chicago cop, he started writing a history book about Chicago. And as he was writing it, he came across the story of the Grimes sisters. Again, this is one of those Chicago history things, especially in Cook County, because of the fact that it's the longest running unsolved case. And he took a big interest in it. So he started to do his own research on who he thought was the actual murderer. He believes that it was 23-year-old confessed child killer Charles Melquist. He believes that Charles Melquist was the one who murdered the Grimes sisters. He was actually even a suspect at the time, but was never really questioned. He was just on the list of when the girls went missing. And the reason why they believe that Melquist was the one who actually murdered the Grimes sisters is because his victim was 15-year-old Bonnie Lee Scott. She was found in September of 1958, about a mile away from where the Grimes sisters were found. So, you know, 2 years after the girl's murder, she was found naked. No one ever knew where her clothes were, but she was actually found decapitated. And yeah, so that was his victim. And it was just the girls, their clothes were never found. They thought maybe the Grimes sisters were just the start, and then, you know, they kind of build up momentum. Melquist was never actually questioned by police, and he did die in 2019. I was watching this investigation thing that one of the local news stations did here, and this police officer actually got in contact with one of Melquist's friends, like one of his best friends who knew him back then. And they were like, hey, like, can you talk? Do you know what he did? And the guy was like, and he was like an old man already, and he's like, he's dead. I just gotta let that lie. I don't want to talk about it. But the thing is somebody was still going out and leaving flowers on the Grimes sisters' grave. And they were wondering, was it the person who killed them, or was it the person who actually knew? And that gave me goosebumps. And another thing, another reason why they assumed that Melquist was the one who did it, days after Bonnie Scott's body was found, Loretta Grimes did receive another phone call. And on this phone call, he took credit for the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott and said that the cops are not going to find him, that he committed another perfect crime, and that he was going to get away with it too, and that there was basically nothing the police could do. Up until her death in 1987, Loretta Grimes believed that caller was the person who was responsible for the murder of her two daughters. So it is now May 2021, and as to date, the Grimes sisters case is still open. If you know anything, know anyone, have any type of information, I urge you guys to get in contact with the police. It is considered a cold case right now, but it is open. I think that these girls deserve some justice. The last sibling I seen on the news was 2013, and he was 73 years old, and he was the brother. He was the little brother of the Grimes sisters, and he was 11 when his sisters died. And so, you know, I don't know if he's still alive at this point. I'm pretty sure, I knew a lot of Grimes from the area, but I'm pretty sure there's probably still family members that are around, and to have that over them, you know, these people want closure. This guy's 73 years old, and he says, I don't think they're gonna find it, but man, I wish they would keep looking. They would keep trying. I just hope they rest in peace. It's really, really sad. It's really, really sad to hear this. I think there was a lot of, I don't want to say, I think they did really well on really getting the ball going and trying to find these girls. Okay, I think that was really, really good police work. What I think was really not great police work was when they had like volunteers looking for clues or looking for evidence, because they can mishandle evidence and they don't know what evidence is because they don't have a trained eye. And maybe if they had people who knew what they were doing, they would have been able to find something. There's no super genius murderer. Somebody gives away something, there's always a clue. Look at Leopold and Loeb. They were geniuses. They still messed up. There's always a mess up. If you ever see anything from these true crime stories, they mess up along the way. They will always get caught. So I'm sure there was some kind of evidence out there that would have linked somebody to these crimes. It just was either overlooked or not handled properly. I think it was Max Flegg who murdered these two girls. I think it was him, and I think that he was the one who called the mom too. I mean, back in the day, you could just call 411 or call the operator and have him connect you to the Grimes residence, but he knew these girls. He was from the area, and I think he knew it. I think it was him. I think that he just got away with it because their hands were tied. But he was later charged for murder, so it wasn't like he was some innocent young man. So I think it was him. What do you guys think? Who do you guys? Do you think it's Charles Melquist? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it was definitely that Max Flegg, and I think who's ever watching these girls' graves knows something. Who's ever leaving flowers knows something. Whether it's your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-uncle, if you hear them talking about it, and I know it's not something you want to do, but people need to be held accountable. You know, these girls deserve to have their closure. This family deserves to have their closure. And it's just really, really awful. And I will say this, I will never ever let my kids walk the streets. I mean, I don't let them walk the streets now, but this, like, for sure, ding, like, they're not doing it. You gotta keep your butt in the house. But that was the story, my friends, of the Grimes sisters, the longest running unsolved case in Cook County history. And how wonderful would it be if we could help solve it? So if you know something, know someone, anything, let your voice be heard. Do the right thing. I hope you guys are having a good one. Stay safe out there, my friends, and take it easy. I'll see you on the next one. Bye, friends.